You probably picture it like this. Thousands of acres of open land stretching as far as the eye can see. Cowboys on horseback. Your own herd of cattle grazing beneath an endless sky. And somewhere on your property, a private lake that's yours alone. You wake up at sunrise, sip your coffee on the porch, and watch your investment grow bigger with every passing day. That's the picture Hollywood sells us. The moment you get closer to Austin, everything changes. Suddenly, that same acre costs anywhere from $7,000 to $30,000. In Colorado's mountain regions, prices range from $15,000 to $50,000 to $50,000 per acre. In those markets, the agricultural value of the land has long since separated from its real estate value. You're no longer paying for the grass that grows there. You're paying for the view, the privacy, and the proximity to wealthy buyers. Now let's do the math. If you want to build a serious cattle operation that generates real income, you'll need around 500 cows. In dry states like Wyoming, a single cow requires between 20 and 30 acres of pasture. That means you'll need somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 acres of land. At $1,000 per acre, you're already spending between $10 million and $15 million and $15 million on raw land alone. And at that point, you don't even own a single cow yet. We're already spending between $10 million and This is where beginners fall into their first major trap. They see the cheap land in Wyoming and think they found an incredible bargain compared to Texas. But cheap land usually means less grass, harsher winters, months of buying expensive hay, and long drives to suppliers and processing facilities. The money you think you're saving on the purchase price ends up costing you many times over in day-to-day operations. In the more expensive parts of Texas, the situation is almost the exact opposite. There, a single cow may need only 3 to 8 acres. The land is significantly more expensive, but the ongoing operating cost per animal is much lower. That's the first rule of ranch economics. The price of the land and the profitability of the land are two completely different numbers. You bought the property, you think you own a ranch. In reality, all you own is an extremely expensive piece of dirt with the for sale sign taken down. Before that land generates a single dollar, you have to build the entire infrastructure. And this is where most first-time ranch owners get blindsided, because none of these costs ever show up in the real estate listing. First, the fences. A standard barbed wire fence costs between $8,000 and $13,000 per mile. On a 15,000-acre ranch, the outer property line alone can easily stretch for 70 miles, and that doesn't even include all the interior fencing needed to separate different herds. Before the first cow ever sets foot on your property, it's entirely possible to spend nearly $500,000 on fencing alone. Next comes water. Without water, nothing survives. Drilling an agricultural well, including pumps, costs anywhere from $8,000 to $25,000. But that's only the beginning. Those pumps need electricity, so you'll either have to run power lines for miles across your property or install solar systems throughout the ranch. After that, you'll need miles of underground water lines leading to watering troughs across the pasture. The third major expense is your livestock handling facilities. You can't vaccinate or load a 1,300-pound cow that doesn't want to cooperate without heavy-duty steel pens. A quality cattle handling system costs anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. The fourth major expense is storage. Cattle eat hay all winter long. For a herd of 500 cows, a harsh winter can require around 25,000 hay bales. If hay gets wet and starts to mold, it's worthless. That means you'll need a massive hay barn. Building one can easily cost well over $100,000. Then come employee housing, equipment sheds for your tractors, and miles of gravel roads so your trucks don't sink into the mud every spring. A new ranch owner can easily invest more than $1 million in infrastructure before the operation is even ready to begin. And none of that capital produces any direct return. It simply allows the ranch to function. Next comes the inventory that breathes and eats. A commercial bred cow currently costs between $2,000 and $30,500. For a herd of 500 cows, you're looking at an investment of roughly $1 million to $1.5 million just for the cows. But you're still not finished. You'll also need bulls. Roughly 1 bull for every 25 cows. That means about 20 bulls for a 500 cow operation. And that's exactly the feeling those flawless real estate listings are designed to create. But there's a brutal reality that no listing will ever show you. The water pump that burned out for no apparent reason last Tuesday, the $30,000 pasture fence that was completely washed away by the spring floods, the massive hay bill that landed on your desk the exact same week the cattle market crashed, and maybe the hardest truth of all, a high-quality breeding bull with elite genetics, one capable of producing calves that grow faster and produce better beef, can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. Those genetics have a direct impact on your revenue at the end of the year. But even a $35,000 bull comes with absolutely no guarantees. One day, it breaks a leg in a creek bed. By Monday morning, that $35,000 investment is simply gone. The total value of your living herd can easily reach $2 million. And unlike a warehouse full of sneakers, this inventory can get sick, it can escape, or it can die. Then comes the equipment. At a minimum, you'll need 2 tractors. Each one costs between $50,000 and $100,000. Heavy-duty pickup trucks, livestock trailers, hay balers, prey balers. Hay balers, if you buy all of that equipment brand new and finance it, you'll be paying around $4,000 every month in loan payments and interest before you've sold a single animal. This is where the fundamental problem with this business really begins. Your income arrives only once a year. Your expenses never stop. Today, the annual operating cost for a single cow is well over $1,000. With a herd of 500 cows, that's more than $500,000 in operating expenses every year. The biggest share of that cost is hay for the winter. A large round bale costs anywhere from $50 to $120. The harsher the winter, the bigger the hay bill. Then come veterinary expenses, vaccinations, medications, and constantly rising labor costs. On top of that, finding skilled ranch hands and experienced mechanics has become harder than ever. Many ranches now survive only by hiring seasonal international workers through specialized visa programs. That means more paperwork, more housing costs, and more overhead. In short, a cattle ranch isn't a weekend hobby. It's a full-scale business with payroll, insurance, maintenance schedules, and an operation that runs 365 days a year without a break. So how do you actually make money from all of this? The business model itself is surprisingly simple. In the spring, each cow gives birth to a calf. The calf spends the next several months nursing, grazing on pasture, and by the fall, it weighs around 550 pounds. That's when it's sold. At today's record high market prices, a calf like that can bring in about $2,200. If you own 500 cows and achieve an excellent calving rate, you'll end up with roughly 450 calves by the end of the year. That translates into about $1 million in gross revenue. At first glance, that sounds incredible. But think back to all the costs we just covered. Hay, veterinary care, payroll, diesel, taxes, equipment depreciation. After all of that is deducted, even in a truly perfect year, you might be left with only about $100,000 in actual net profit. On a $10 million investment, that's a return of just 1% profit. On a $10 million investment, that's a return of that, and that's already the absolute best case scenario. A basic savings account can generate a better return with virtually no risk. That's the little-known secret of the cattle industry. Selling calves alone produces extremely thin profit margins, and this is exactly where the invisible trap snaps shut. If you think a 1% return is disappointing, just wait until Mother Nature gets involved. If you enjoy honest financial breakdowns like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what comes next is what brings even the most experienced ranchers to their knees. Drought. The moment the rain stops falling in June, the grass stops growing. That means you'll have to start buying hay months earlier than expected. But you're not the only one facing that problem. Every rancher in your state is rushing to buy hay at exactly the same time. Demand explodes, prices skyrocket. A hay bale that used to cost $100 can suddenly cost $300. Almost overnight, your operating costs spiral out of control. Sooner or later, your cash reserves run dry, and eventually you're left with no choice but to sell your most valuable assets. You're breeding cows that over the last 3 years, you've barely made any real profit, because every single dollar you earn goes straight back into the ranch before you ever get the chance to keep it. Ranching is one of the most misunderstood business models in the world. From the outside, it looks like the ultimate freedom. From the ant side, it's an incredibly complex business. Your income comes in only once or twice a year. Your expenses show up every single day, the very animals that were supposed to generate your income for years to come. But because everyone else is selling at the same time, the market becomes flooded with cattle. Prices collapse, and you're forced to sell your most important income-producing assets for far less than they're actually worth. The following year, you no longer have enough cows to produce a full calf crop. That's how financial ruin begins. When the cattle market finally recovers a few years later, you're forced to rebuild your herd at dramatically higher prices. The volatility in this business is brutal. In just 6 months, swings in calf prices can mean the difference of tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars for a large operation. So how do some ranchers manage to survive for decades, or even generations? The answer is simple. They stopped relying on cattle alone a long time ago. They build multiple streams of income. For example, they lease hunting rights to executives and hunters from the city. On a large ranch, that alone can generate hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And the cattle keep grazing as if nothing changed. Some ranchers sell excess hay. Others open their ranches to agritourism. Burned-out professionals gladly pay up to $800 a night just to spend a few days living the cowboy lifestyle. But there's one tool that's even more powerful, and almost nobody outside the industry knows about it. It's called a conservation easement. Under this agreement, the landowner commits to never selling the property to developers or allowing it to be turned into housing projects. The land remains permanently protected in its natural state. In return, the government provides substantial tax benefits. In some cases, those tax deductions can virtually eliminate a landowner's federal income tax for as long as 15 years. This isn't some illegal tax loophole. Quite the opposite. It's a government-approved program specifically designed to encourage land conservation. That's exactly why American billionaires buy massive ranches at prices that seem to make absolutely no financial sense at first glance. Ted Turner, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. These people aren't buying ranches to get rich raising cattle. What they're really buying is complete privacy, vast private retreats, and a long-term way to preserve their wealth. Historically, farmland and pastureland in the United States have steadily increased in value. Land doesn't go bankrupt. It doesn't report disappointing quarterly earnings, and it doesn't let investors down. If a billionaire buys a $100 million ranch and places it under a conservation easement, they can qualify for tax benefits worth tens of millions of dollars. At the same time, they can take advantage of significant tax incentives available to agricultural operations. In many cases, simply keeping a small number of cattle on the property is enough to maintain its agricultural status. The cattle aren't the real business. Tax strategy is. So let's strip away the romance and look at the numbers. Let's say you buy a 5,000-acre ranch in Texas today for 35 million acres. You finance part of the purchase. In the first year alone, you pay roughly $1.4 million interest. Then you invest millions more in equipment, livestock, infrastructure, and everything else needed to keep the operation running. Even in an exceptionally good year, a herd of 200 cattle might generate only about $160,000 in net profit from beef production. Now pay close attention to this number. That $160,000 covers only a small fraction of the interest you're paying the bank on the land. In other words, the cattle business by itself is a financial nightmare. But while you're working every day just to keep the ranch operating, something far more important is happening in the background. The value of your land keeps increasing. Let's assume the land appreciates by just 4% a year. On a property worth $35 million, that's an increase in wealth of roughly $1.4 million every single year, at least on paper. That's the real secret, and the single most important variable in your entire financial equation. The weather doesn't answer to anyone. Some ranchers genuinely make money. Others slowly, quietly, and relentlessly drain their owners while the value of the land keeps rising on paper. And some destroy people financially before they ever realize what's happening. Before we dive into the unbelievable numbers, leave a quick comment below. The cattle don't make you rich. They simply allow you to keep the land. In the long run, it's the land that builds wealth. In a good year, you ride across your pastures. Calf prices are high. The rain arrives exactly when you need it. And your net worth keeps climbing. In a bad year, a March blizzard can wipe out your newborn calves. Skyrocketing hay prices can throw your finances into chaos, and you may have to burn through $500,000 in cash reserves just to avoid going bankrupt. The difference between the ranchers who succeed for generations and the ones who fail isn't intelligence. And it isn't hard work. The real difference is something else. Deep cash reserves, multiple income streams, and the financial strength to survive the bad years without being forced to sell the land, because in this business, the land is the entire game. The cattle are simply the price of admission. A ranch can absolutely make you very wealthy, but not because of the cattle, and certainly not as quickly as you imagined while sipping coffee on your porch. The romance of ranch life is real. Its financial reality is every bit as ruthless. If you want to succeed in this world, you have to master both. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more unfiltered financial insights, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care. What do you think the annual return is on a well-run cattle ranch? The answer is about to surprise you. And if anyone guesses it correctly, I'll honestly be impressed. But before we talk about money, we first need to understand what a ranch actually is. Because the word ranch is used to describe at least 6 completely different business models. The only thing they all have in common is a large piece of land. A cattle ranch produces beef. A sheep ranch produces wool and meat. A horse ranch breeds and trains horses. A hunting ranch makes money from wildlife instead of livestock. Then there are guest ranches. They sell something completely different. Horseback riding, campfires, the experience of living like a cowboy for a few days. In other words, they're selling an experience. And then there's an entirely different category: luxury recreational ranches. These ranches produce almost nothing. Their real product is massive tax advantages and secluded private retreats for billionaires. They may share the same zip code and similar fences. Financially, though, they have almost nothing in common. A guest ranch in Texas and a working cattle ranch in Montana are two completely different worlds. One is essentially a boutique hotel with horses. The other is a commodity business fighting the global beef market every single day. Today, we're focusing on the most complex model, the traditional cattle ranch, because it has by far the most moving parts. The biggest expense on a cattle ranch isn't the livestock, and it isn't the equipment. It's the land itself. And depending on where you buy, prices can vary dramatically. According to the latest data, the average price of pasture land in the United States is around $2,000 per acre. At first glance, that doesn't sound too bad. But that national average hides some extreme differences. In Wyoming, you can still buy land for about $1,000 an acre. In parts of West Texas, you can find it for as little as $600 an acre. Those are the cheapest options on the market. And they're cheap for a reason.